this point, every information portal is saturated with mindfulness content. But this show is a unique, unusual, curious take on mindfulness. Some of what you hear will be completely new to you. Let's dive in and take a look at the nature of the aware mind. I invite you to deepen your awareness so that you may be liberated and inspired.
Today we are here with Sarah Vallely, a mindfulness teacher, coach, and author. Sarah has been teaching meditation and mindfulness for the past 2 decades, training and certifying others to teach mindfulness as well. Sarah is the author of 4 books. Her latest book is titled Tame, Soothe, Dwell, the 55 Teachings of TSD Mindfulness. On today's episode, we will be discussing how to recognize common thought patterns of thinking that often lead to stress and how to use self-compassion to bring yourself out of this type of thinking. I'm Jacob Durosset. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great, Jacob. I've got a question for you.
Okay.
When you are a little bit stressed or just going through your daily life, what are some of the thoughts that you have? Like, what form do your thoughts take?
Something I've noticed is that the time of day really depends on what my thoughts are kind of consumed with. In the morning, I'm typically thinking about something that has been, burning up that I need to get done, or something I need to do later that day, or something I've been avoiding, or a conversation I might be a bit nervous about.
Yeah, so that sounds like some planning thinking. When you're thinking about the future and things that you need to do, I definitely do that. After meeting with a client, I will spend time thinking about and planning what I will do next to proceed with the client. And the thing is when we do this type of thinking, we need to sometimes, right? It's required for our jobs, or for our daily living, we need to be able to make plans, but it turns into overthinking when we're doing it in excess, or we're doing it when it's not necessary. And what we can do if we're having that type of thinking is we can use our mindfulness and notice and name it. We can say, overthinking, or we can name it, planning. I'm in planning mode again. Or, I'm projecting. And so that could be so valuable because we're accepting that it's happening. We're not denying it. We're not pushing it away. But at the same time, we're able to take a step back and be more of an observer. Okay, I'm just noticing this. And then we can retrain our mind patterns by shifting our attention to either the sounds in the environment or some physical sensations in your body, or even your own breath. And one more thing that can be extremely helpful in limiting this type of thinking or quieting it is to give ourselves self-compassion for the thinking. We don't want to beat ourselves up. We don't want to devalue ourselves because we're in this planning type of thinking, but instead we can give ourselves self-compassion, and we give ourselves self-compassion with our words, or we give ourselves self-compassion with an action. And so some words that we could use in this kind of situation is, it's natural for anyone to go into planning mode. It's okay to do this. I'm a good planner. However, I deserve a break from this mental activity. And that's such a beautiful thing to say to ourselves when we find ourselves in that planning type mode.
What is it about identifying things in our immediate environment that helps to stop the overthinking? What is it about hearing sounds in the room that quietens that down?
Well, it gives our attention something else to focus on. If we shift that attention toward the sounds in the environment, or the sensations in our body, or our breath, we're actually using a different part of our brain. Mm-hmm. To think about it as our sensory experience. And being in that sensory experience has a lot of advantages. Helps with concentration, helps with feeling relaxed.
Why is it that somebody would need to use self-compassion during that time? Like, why is it that we would beat ourselves up at all about thoughts?
Well, some of us might be dabbling in mindfulness and might be learning that it's good to think less and to not ruminate so much, not worry so much, not be so distracted. And so we're learning that that's better. And maybe it doesn't have anything to do with mindfulness. Maybe it's just something that your teachers over time have taught you in school, or things that your parents have said, or things that your friends have said. And so we start to get this mentality that, ooh, it's bad if I'm in these type of thought cycles. We are in this pattern of putting ourselves down because we're doing something, quote, bad, because that's what happened a lot when we were children, probably. Yeah. And so we've developed that practice or habit, and saying some compassionate words can help break the habit of putting yourself down when you're doing something that you think is bad. And that's the other concept I really want to get across here, is these thought cycles aren't bad. So let's talk about rumination. I'm sure you have had times where you've thought about the past and replayed a moment or an event that happened in the past, and you were analyzing it. Is that something that you find yourself doing sometimes?
If I say something that I feel like could have potentially offended someone, next thing you know, I have a whole list of demands of myself, and not one bit of compassion in there. Tons of rumination. Yeah.
If you think about our ancestors, the rumination practice was actually saving their lives, because they were more likely to physically survive when they replayed an event that happened in the past and evaluated it and analyzed its parts so that they learned from it. Considering the evolution of our brains, we don't need to think of these type of thought cycles as bad. They're just natural. They're part of our DNA. They're part of our evolution. They're not bad. And that's part of the self-compassion piece, is reminding ourselves this is natural. You might say something like, I'm loved and I'm worthy even when I make a mistake. And it's natural for me to slip into rumination. That self-compassion type speak will diminish some of that rumination, as well as just helping you feel better. Yeah. Think of a kid who's, upset about something, and then you just validate the child and give the child some compassion, and the child feels better and is not caught up in the thinking as much anymore. Worry's the same thing, right? So when we worry, it's because we're experiencing anxiety or uneasiness about a problem that's going on right now, or something that has the potential to be a problem. Our ancestors lived in this immediate return environment, which means that they had an action, they made an action, and then there was an immediate return for their action. For example, they might have made a decision to stop eating and run away from a predator. And the immediate return on that was that they were not mangled. Right. Or maybe they made a poor decision and they made a decision not to stop eating, and then in the end they got hurt by the predator. So there was an immediate return on their action. But in today's society, we live in a delayed return environment, which means a lot of the actions that we take, we don't experience the consequence of that action until days later, weeks later, or even maybe years later. For example, we go to work and we don't get a paycheck for 2 weeks, or we sign a contract and we don't get the outcome of that contract until a couple months later. So there's this delayed return. And the issue is that there's all this time in between now, between the action and the consequence, and it gives us all this time to worry. Our ancestors didn't have all that time to worry, so it was healthy, but now it's not healthy and causing anxiety and depression because we're doing it for so long. And that's why mindfulness is so helpful. It's like the antidote, because we can notice that we are worrying, notice those worry thoughts, and we can name it worry. And then we can also do some mind training and shift our attention to the sounds in the environment, physical sensations in the body, or the breath, to redirect our attention. And then we can also give ourselves self-compassion. We might say, I've been evolved to worry, and there's nothing wrong with me if I do worry. However, in this moment, I deserve to feel peace and let go of the outcome. Do you get worried about things? Have you gone into worry mode?
Yeah, yeah. I am a professional warrior. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that drew me to mindfulness. So I have a really big fear of flying, and no real like nothing happened. I had I mean, anybody that flies at any amount, you have scary experiences on planes, but I have a thing now that I do where if I'm about to fly or if my wife is flying, I will start to pick up little things in life that are telling me that something bad will happen when I'm on the plane, which is just insanity. I mean, that is the definition of just crazy, right? I'll see the number 747 somewhere unrelated to an aircraft, and I just think this is a sign. This is it. Is that worry? I think it is, right?
Yeah, and that's also a great example of living in a delayed return environment
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you buy the ticket online maybe a month in advance. So there's all
yeah.
this time to go into all this worry. It's a little bit maddening. But let's say it was just a complete surprise and someone blindfolded you. I mean, you might be worried because you're blindfolded, but
Yeah, yeah.
and then all of a sudden you didn't buy the ticket, you didn't know anything about the flight, and then you just are unblindfolded once you walk onto the plane, and so you were saved that whole month of advance of being worried.
Yeah, I should start hiring someone to every time I have to fly, they just sack me up and throw me on the plane. They don't
Right.
tell me I'm going to fly though. Somehow like the whole experience is hidden from me.
Yeah, that could be a new profession.
It's like people that slowly get into the pool versus people that cannonball in. Some people are like, I don't want to experience the discomfort for long periods of time. I just want it to kind of get it over with. But I was wanting to hear your thought on what to say to somebody that really does not find it easy to practice self-compassion.
Yeah, and that's the badassery factor here.
Yeah.
Because it really takes bravery to get to a point where you're able to give yourself self-compassion. And the reason is because we need to become vulnerable enough to admit that we need self-compassion. It's so easy for us to say, oh, I don't need that. I'm fine. I've got this. I'm strong. I'm just going to power through. I'm just going to drink another coffee. I'm just going to, go for a jog. I'm going to be fine. But it takes a lot of strength to be able to say to yourself, you know what, I really am being hard on myself and I could use some self-compassion. So the advice would be to allow yourself to move into that vulnerability and know that it doesn't make you any weaker, doesn't make you any lesser of a person. In fact, it's the opposite. Moving into that vulnerability shows strength and shows what an amazingly dynamic person you are. But another type of thinking that I notice that I have is like I'm rehearsing myself explaining myself to somebody. For example, I might tell somebody that I can't attend an event, and then I find myself like rehearsing this whole like explanation of why I can't go. Or I might be writing an email in my head, kind of explaining or justifying why I did something, a certain way. This type of thinking is sometimes necessary, especially if we are learning or making decisions. We need to start explaining things to ourselves or justify that we are going to take a certain action. But it becomes overthinking if we do it in excess or we do it when it's not necessary, which I definitely do. It's great to be mindful and notice that you're in that type of thinking and name it. Say, oh, that's justification thinking. Oh, I'm doing that explanation thinking again, or just simply calling it overthinking. And then redirecting your attention toward the sounds in the environment or your breath or physical sensations. And then that self-compassion piece could be something like, it's natural for anyone to want to prove themselves right. However, I do not need to do this. When it comes to my emotions, my beliefs, my actions, I don't need to explain or justify myself. I deserve to be surrounded by love and feel at peace.
I noticed that I do a lot of explaining thinking when I've been criticized. I really tend to react with a doubling down of my reasons and really explaining myself either out loud or internally of why I have all the reason in the world to do what I did. And then, an hour or two, or maybe a day later, I'm like, wow, no, that was all a defense. It was that thinking coming online to protect me in a way.
Yeah. And that sounds like badass mindfulness because you are confronting yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that's hard to do. It's hard to call out your type of thinking. Yeah, I'm in some rumination, or this is worry thinking, or this is overthinking. You're calling yourself out. And that takes a lot of guts, because you are admitting that your thought process isn't perfect, which is really healing and humbling, because humbling is healing, because we are moving into this new way of thinking that we're just human and we're not perfect. And that can be a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another type of thinking that we might notice is kind of some of this catastrophic type thinking, this worst case scenario type thinking, which has been studied. The research term for this type of thinking is called cognitive elaboration. This is when something happens in our life, an event happens, but we don't have all the information about the event. And so we start filling in the misinformation in with worst case scenarios. And again, this is part of our evolution. This process of filling in missing information with our preconceived notions, our prior experience, this process helped our ancestors stay alive. An example of that would be, I hear some big crunching in the woods, don't have all the information, but because of prior experience, this person has witnessed a tiger come out of the woods after hearing that big creaking, cracking in the woods. So they're filling in the missing information that, yeah, that could be a tiger and that tiger could eat me. Yeah, catastrophic thinking, but back thousands of years ago, that was like life-saving thinking. But now this catastrophic type thinking is not really life-saving. I mean, that's going to lead to anxiety and depression.
So what I'm hearing is that a lot of this training is actually just not necessarily uploading a lot of techniques and things. It's more or less just understanding your natural way of being.
Yeah, mindfulness is number one about awareness. It's just being aware. And the idea is that when the more you become aware, the more likely it is this naturally that you're going to minimize this type of thinking.
The North Star of it all is just compassion and understanding of yourself, and understanding that like I have so little control of all of these processes, but I can step back and be aware of them and see them as they unfold. And that helps to minimize the ones that are destructive and increase the ones that are productive in life.
Mm-hmm. Notice yourself having one of these mental processes and then give yourself some self-compassion, see what happens. I mean, it will lead to feelings of relief, feelings of validation, feelings of, I don't need to keep doing this. But at the same time, having all those feelings without feeling like you're doing something wrong or you're lesser of a person.
Please visit our website at tsdmind.org. That is T as in tame, S as in soothe, and D as in dwell. Mind as in mindfulness.org. Check out our blog post for this episode with links to supplemental information such as worksheets you can use to put into practice the mindfulness skills shared in this episode. Also, please sign up for our newsletter and receive mindfulness tips. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram